onto our final discussion of the day. And have we been saving the best till last? Obviously, I obviously feel so. My colleague Francis is on this call, and we've fittingly worn matching striped t-shirts today. But I will remain impartial as I'm here in an IAB Europe capacity. The reason that we save this session for last is because whilst we talk about new developments and innovations, it's so important that we do regular check-ins with the industry to see what's actually being done. Are we making progress? Are we succeeding in building brand safe environments for stakeholders? And most importantly, for the people that use the platforms. So to see if we are and to shed some light on transparency and industry best practice, I'm delighted to introduce our moderator, Sarah Rhodes, who is the Strategic Enterprise Account Executive from IAS. Welcome, Sarah, and over to you for the final session.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabah Rhodes. I am, as Ryan mentioned, a Strategic Enterprise Account Executive at Integral Ad Science. For those of you who don't know much about Integral Ad Science, we are a leading global media measurement and optimization platform, and our mission is to be the global benchmark for trust and transparency in digital media quality. So personally, I work with global brands daily to help them navigate reputational risk across the digital ecosystem. And I have been at IAS for over 8 years. And as I'm sure you can imagine, over that time, I've seen the evolution of brand safety due to the ever-changing digital media landscape and also the booming content growth that we've seen as an industry. So that in turn has seen marketers increasingly invested in protecting their brand's reputation and allocating media budgets towards content that minimizes the risk to their brand. And today I am joined by a great panel of experts, and we're going to be discussing some of the insights from the IAB's latest brand safety survey that looked at advertising industry expert views as to how brand safety was tackled last year and determine what still needs to happen going forward. So some of the key highlights of that study were that 67% of respondents agreed that brand safety was a key priority for the industry last year. Other priorities were privacy concerns, transparency, and sustainability. 53% of respondents agreed that the industry has done a good job of tackling brand safety over the past 12 months. And 71% cited that technology innovations helped solve brand safety concerns, and that was up from 65% in 2019. Let's welcome our panelists today. Can I ask that you all introduce yourselves and tell us what brand safety and suitability means to you and your organisation? Alex, can we start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Sabah. Yes, so hello, everyone. I'm Alex, and I lead GroupM's brand safety work, primarily focused across EMEA. This essentially involves working with our brands, our partners, our platforms, everywhere in between to mitigate digital risk and kind of address brand and user safety in digital media. For GroupM and for our clients, I think there's quite an important distinction between brand safety and brand suitability and how these are approached. We define brand safety as content that's not fit for monetization or inappropriate for advertising, but also content that no brand would feel comfortable being adjacent to or funding. This is the core responsibility of the work that we do in the brand safety team. Brand suitability is a build on this and is about balancing reach and protection, but tailoring it to your kind of brand's own unique requirements or values or potential nuances and sensitivities. So I guess to summarize it, brand safety is not specific to a certain brand, but brand suitability will differ brand to brand. So I guess you can view brand safety as the foundation, and brand suitability is built on top to make sure that every brand appears in a contextual environment that is appropriate to them. What we have seen, which is really valuable, is the kind of growing industry collaboration, I always struggle with that word, that kind of standardizing this approach. And by that, GARM, the Global Alliance of Responsible Media, who obviously amongst various other focuses have really helped to provide those common definitions of kind of what brand safety and suitability look like, so which really helps brands and us and platforms and so on to leverage that. So we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. And yeah, this is really important, not only to maximize kind of protection of potential content that might not be safe or suitable, but also for ensuring kind of minimized wastage and efficiency as well.
Thanks, Alex. Amber.
Great. I would second everything Alex said for the difference between brand safety and suitability and how we define it. I'm a product manager at Triton Digital, and we are a global company operating in about 86 different countries. We're focused on the supply side advertising technology space, and our goal is to really help publishers monetize their audio inventory. So when we talk about brand safety and suitability, we're really talking about advertising in the podcasting space. We have advertising available for on-demand and radio, but radio, which is really an extension of on-demand, is very regulated. It's FCC regulated. There's a lot of elements already in place to control some of the brand safety and suitability levers, whereas podcast is anyone with a microphone and computer can have a podcast. And so I like to think of podcast advertising as very similar to influencer marketing. There's a lot of benefits and challenges and parallels between podcast advertising and influencer marketing. But when it comes to brand safety and suitability, this is where we're seeing a lot of publishers lean into to make podcasting more attractive to their advertisers. So again, exactly what Alex said, for brand safety, it's very fixed categories. No brand wants to be associated with it. I think these two categories get very conflated, especially by buyers. So it's important to differentiate between the brand safety piece and the brand suitability piece. We're seeing more publishers and brands lean into the brand suitability elements of advertising, just because brand suitability is much more subjective to the actual brand. And you can do a lot of things to really tailor the content and bundle inventory to align with what the brand is trying to achieve and target when it comes to podcast advertising.
Thanks, Amber. Francis?
Thanks, Sabah. Hi, everyone. I'm Francis. I'm head of brand safety for TikTok and focus on Europe. What that means is educating the industry and people like Alex and GroupM on the work that TikTok's doing on brand safety and suitability. And Amber and Alex said it all, really. The difference between safety and suitability is there. For TikTok, it's video, it's sound, it's comments, it's text, it's accounts, it's everything that we look at to best label to be able to offer the controls when it comes to suitability and safety. But if we think holistically, it should go further than that in terms of platform integrity. And so when topics are misinformation and hate speech, what are we doing in areas like that, and how are we overcoming them to offer people that really nice experience, which then falls into safety and suitability?
Thank you, Francis. Sarah?
Hi, thanks, Sabah. First off, as I say, I'm thrilled to be part of such a great panel of people, and you've already covered, I think, pretty much everything that falls under brand safety and suitability. My name's Sarah Bakai. I'm the head of safety and integrity solutions marketing at Meta. I think there's just a small nuance for us at Meta. When we're thinking about brand safety, we really see it the same as people safety. We believe when we can create an environment that's safe for people, by default, that same environment should also be safe for brands as well. Alex mentioned all the great work that GARM's done around standardizing frameworks across the industry, both around the brand safety floor as well as brand suitability frameworks, to make sure that there's common language, definitions, and understanding, so that from an advertiser or an agency point of view, it's really clear to understand how those things apply broadly across the industry as well. For us, when we're thinking about suitability, we understand that just because we are allowing content on our platforms, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's suitable for monetization. So we do have some different policies that we have there on that side, just to make sure that we're setting the right threshold for suitability too, and making sure that we have the right tools and reporting so that advertisers can set, the word unique has come up a lot, but like around their unique preferences or requirements that they have for their own brands.
Thank you, Sarah. Certainly for us, from a verification perspective as well, you can tell, obviously, the ecosystem's fragmented, but as you've all said, we're trying to get to that consistent measurement, and GARM, etc., really helps there. Okay, so one of the key findings in the survey was that 67% of respondents agreed, or strongly agreed, that brand safety was still a key priority for the industry in 2022. So let's discuss why that was. Alex, can we start with you?
Sure. So I think every year, brings its challenges, but 2022 particularly certainly brought new and new unique considerations for brand safety for us as an industry, but also there was obviously broader societal challenges as well, which obviously have an impact on the work that we do in brand safety, whether that be the kind of challenging current affairs or emerging platforms and technologies, or I suppose like the increasing levels of regulation such as the DSA and the impact that has as well. All of that basically means I think brand safety has been in the spotlight as much as ever, and I think rightly. And I suppose the stat that you mentioned is reflective of this and reflective of the kind of different conversations that we have as well with the industry. Also, I do think it highlights, though, that there's a kind of need for a continued focus in this space, particularly as we operate in new and sometimes difficult spaces. And I don't think the need for this focus will diminish or disappear anytime soon. And yeah, I think it would be interesting to explore the 33% that kind of maybe don't see it as a priority as well. But no, that's my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Alex. And you mentioned there are obviously emerging channels and emerging platforms. So Amber, it'd be really interesting to hear your point of view on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So podcast is about 20 years old, so longer than I think some of us realize, but still in its infancy in a lot of ways, and we're still figuring this out. So I think when we talk about the rise of brand safety being a really key focus in the podcast space, we have to look at the history of podcast advertising. And that is, historically, ads were baked in directly to the episode. This made it really difficult to run large campaigns across multiple shows or by audience segments at scale. And publishers realized that shows were going vastly under monetized and impressions were going unsold. So as an industry, we've shifted to this more dynamic ad insertion world to help monetize and meet buyers' needs to get that scale that they're looking for. But that means buyers can no longer just shift through hours and hours of content and deem if a show qualifies. We really have to use data-driven insights such as AI and other things to contextually look at an episode and at scale see if that episode's aligned with the brand. So we've partnered with companies, and I think the industry is still figuring it out in a lot of ways, but some of the things that we've done is around contextual targeting, utilizing a podcast transcript to analyze and pull out keywords, detect episode tone, and label content based on different categories. We're seeing this as a really great way to increase that scale, but also meet buyers' needs of brand safety and suitability. An example of this would be, historically, Disney as a brand would just exclude any sports genre in the podcast space. But now that we can do things like contextual targeting and brand suitability, we can do things like still include sports as a genre, but maybe exclude an ad from playing on any episode that mentions MMA or boxing. And so that's just the level of content and inventory bundling that we're moving towards to help align the need of brand safety and brand suitability.
Thanks, Amber. Yeah, I think for us from a advertiser's perspective as well, we're seeing we're increasingly asked, and it's exactly about that, being able to scale brands safely across different platforms, taking suitability into account. We're asked more and more about our emerging channels. As you say, audio's been around for a while, but in terms of brand suitability and brand safety, what can we do in terms of capabilities of roadmap? And we introduce stuff like podcast level brand safety as new measurements. So we're constantly evolving as your spaces as well. Okay, Sarah, the first line of protection is the ability for a platform to moderate content that creates an environment for brands to want to be a part of. Can you tell us more about how Meta are dealing with that as a challenge?
Yeah. So for us, I guess the first step is to explain we have our community standards and our community guidelines, which are across Facebook and Instagram, which is really that threshold around the sorts of content that we think has a space on our platforms. We work with external experts to make sure that these policies sit in the right place. So that includes NGOs, civil rights, human rights experts, as well as regulators, to really make sure that we have those baselines to make sure that we can have people engaging in safe environments. When it comes to ensuring that we can remove the content off our platforms that violates those standards, we use a mix of human review as well as AI to ensure that we can get it off as quickly as possible. And we also report out quarterly on how we're doing in that space. So we have our community standards enforcement report that we release each quarter, a quick plug that we released our most recent one earlier this month, which covers across Q2 of this year. So when we're looking at this, we really want people to understand the likelihood of coming across content that is within that threshold set by the GARM Brand Safety 4, which we talked about earlier on. We also understand, as we mentioned earlier, that each brand has their own unique preferences. So we also have tools, controls, and reporting to make sure that you can tailor for those preferences. Sabah, you also touched on the importance of external verification and validation when we're putting reporting and those sorts of things out as well. So we're really proud that we have the MRC Brand Safety Accreditation, and we're also tagged Brand Safety Certified with the MRC accreditation. We're currently going through a renewal for that as well for 2024 with expanded scope. And the other thing I think we've all touched on is like the importance of industry partnership and collaboration to really drive progress of the industry as a whole further forward, because we know that this area is constantly evolving and moving forward as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Obviously, AI and tech you've mentioned there plays a key role in what you're doing. And in the survey, technology was cited as one of the key things that's helping to solve brand safety concerns. From a verification perspective, on the open web, we've certainly seen this move away from legacy tools like keywords to more sophisticated tools like contextual page analysis, multimedia classification. Alex, it would be great to understand more about how tech is enabling your organisation, so GroupM, and building trust with your clients and partners.
Sure. So I think technology, and I suppose specifically how it kind of pertains to brand safety, has advanced significantly in a couple of key areas over the past year or so. You've touched on one of them, but it's been really important for us is the advancement of the brand safety technology to enable a shift away from what was sometimes blunt tools for managing brand safety into that kind of really granular kind of content, page level, contextual and sentiment analysis. This has really helped us to be able to understand, can sometimes be really subtle, but equally really important nuances across different types of content and context as well. This has helped us to drive efficiencies and reduce wastage, but it also has helped us to make sure that brand safety sort of tools and safeguards that are being in place don't negatively impact on kind of other areas of media responsibility, whether that's supporting kind of credible, responsible news journalism or kind of reaching diverse groups and underrepresented audiences as well, just to name two areas. And what's also important, and you mentioned it with the multimedia, is that this technology is available in as many environments as possible. Secondly, and we've heard a lot of this topic already today, so I won't talk about it for too long, but I think it's clear how AI, and in particular generative AI technology, has some amazing applications, but there's also, it does raise questions around content creation, copyright, misinformation, and these types of things. But what we are seeing is how this exact same technology already is and will continue to be so critical in combating this challenge as well, adding that much needed scalability and accuracy to the kind of content analysis and detection process that many platforms use today as well.
Thanks, Alex. And Francis, it would be great to hear from you in terms of what TikTok's doing, obviously with so much user-generated content, how technology plays a role there.
Yeah, and technology, it's really important just because of the sheer volumes of content, tens of millions of videos posted every single day. There's a huge element of human moderation in that, but just to get through those volumes and identify content that shouldn't be on the platform, whether that content's monetizable and eligible for people's For You feeds, and then labeling it, people like Alex and other agencies can plan based on their suitability and safety needs. And I think people are getting comfortable with the efficacy of technology, and the majority of the stuff is labeled well, labeled accurately, and the number of brand safety, like the adjacency issues that you used to hear a lot of, that's reducing in number. But, and I know actually IAS have an amazing frame-by-frame analysis on suitability, the technology that you've been promoting this year, so it's really good. I think it's great. But I think there's always a human element that's still needed. And if you... misinformation, if you take the example of misinformation, it's completely different from other content issues, that in context and nuance, and Alex mentioned those two words, that it's really important to, and it's like the fact checking, especially on misinformation, is critical to consistently and accurately enforcing platform misinformation policy. So you do use technology. We use safety classifiers, deep learning models, decision engines to be able to classify and label content, but a lot of that work that technology has done is then passed on to humans to work with fact-checking partners, because what was misinformation this week might not have been misinformation that last week. But most importantly is that technology is actually the end result, and technology improves because that's the human decision is training data, and that training data gets fed back into the models, and the models can be more accurate and improve and deal with those volumes that we do have. I think the industry is getting very comfortable with the work that technology is doing, but there's still that gap in some content and context issues that humans have to play a part.
Yeah, interesting. I think there'll always be that human element to play as well. Finally, looking at what needs to happen in 2023 and beyond, to further tackle brand safety and ensure trust for advertisers and consumers, responses in the survey focused on creating new rules for new creators, safeguarding customer privacy, and more verification and content control. So to wrap up today's session, it would be really good to hear from each of you to tell me what question we should be asking, advertisers and planners should be asking to their advertising partners to better prepare for the future. Francis, shall we start with you?
Sure. I think all of customer privacy, more verification, content control, all important. For TikTok, our number one focus is safeguarding customer privacy, especially Cyber Europe, and we're in Europe and focusing on privacy in Europe. And it's a challenge the industry faces. There's more and more scrutiny on the industry, but there's in particular a lot of scrutiny on TikTok when it comes to privacy and security. And all platforms do collect data, whether that's to provide a better user experience, to serve advertising, to help recommend relevant content in people's feeds. But we have that responsibility to secure that European user data, that protected data, names, IP addresses, email addresses, and things like that. And I think there's going to be a continued focus and doubling down on what privacy is, and whether that's storing European user data locally within European Union, European Economic Area boundaries, whether that's creating security gateways to restrict access to user data, protected user data by the people within the company in other jurisdictions or other countries. And I think Sarah mentioned earlier, auditing, right? It's easy for me to come and say that we say what we do, or we do what we say, but actually having somebody else verify that is really important. So I think for me, privacy is going to be the focus next year.
Thank you, Francis. Sarah, it'd be great to hear your views following on from that.
Thank you. Massive +1 to everything that Francis said, particularly around privacy. I think across the industry, it's something all of us are concerned about. I'll talk about something slightly different though, just to keep some diversity on the panel and focus in on content control. So in the session before this, David touched on this theme, and I think we've talked about it today around trust being earned and not assumed. So when we can really be transparent, when we can come to common understanding across the industry and really progress things further forward, that's where we're going to see the greatest progress being made. It's around independent verification, it's around auditing, but it's also around things like sharing technologies and helping to advance the industry where we can. At Meta, we open sourced a technology which is called HMA, which is the Hasher Matcher Actioner tool, which was not named by marketing clearly, but is around helping people who have smaller platforms or may not be able to invest the same amount in technology as what we can, to be able to do the same sorts of AI, take down content across their platforms. We're one of the founding members through NECMEC, which is the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, for the partnership of Take It Down, which is helping people under 18 take back control of intimate images that may have been shared without their consent across platforms as well. And we're also a chair of GIFCT, which is the Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism. Lots of long acronyms there, but it's really through these different initiatives, when we collectively come together and collaborate, that we can really see great change being driven forward across the industry, particularly as we're thinking about the safety side of the things. And it's really, as Francis mentioned, we need to demonstrate action, and we also need to make sure that all of us are being transparent and having open dialogue with the industry as a whole around the areas that we still have to make progress on to push things further forward. The question I would pose would be one, I guess it's twofold. One, have you actually set your unique brand suitability preferences? And if you have, part 1B would be, when was the last time you reviewed them? So when it comes to brand suitability, this shouldn't be set and forget. You should be really reviewing these at a regular cadence to make sure that as your brand evolves, as the environment and the landscape that you're operating within is changing as well, that you're really reflecting the current values, principles, and appropriate ways to show up across the different platforms that you may be advertising across.
Thank you, Sarah. Amber?
Great. So I would say we're still evolving around this as we look at 2023 and really 2024, as this year is wrapping up really quickly. But our ultimate goal will always be to support our publishers' liquidity in the market, which means creating new and unique methods to bundle inventory to meet these buyers' demands around brand safety and suitability. And looking ahead, we're really looking at two key areas. The first one being reducing friction for publishers to measure and target their inventory. I heard a little bit of the last panel talk a lot about measurement and the importance of that. And that's something that's really important for us to focus on as we talk to other different data providers that specialize in measuring media quality. We've talked to companies like NewsGuard, which focuses on misinformation monitors, Sonnet, which is another audio data solution that does things like smart ad markers, which is really interesting when we think about hyper-specific content alignment. So the first one is really the data piece and making sure publishers can analyze their inventory in that way. And then the second one is we're getting a lot of interest around the programmatic space to offer brand safety and suitability. So really thinking about how we extend this to the programmatic offering. We see brand safety becoming potentially the next IVT in the programmatic space. So just like IVT, ensuring brand safety will become expected for all content in that space. And then how do we leverage suitability and contextual targeting in like an open PMP marketplace? That's the big questions that we're asking ourselves as we move forward. And then for the second part of your question around what the question I would pose to the advertisers and planners, I've talked a lot about like bundling inventory and what that looks like, but I would actually pose the question and just ask about their creative production strategy. You can bundle your inventory all you want and contextual target, but if, especially in podcast, if the actual creative content doesn't align with the podcast content, it can be really jarring and a bit of a style clash. And with all the tools available out there for DCO and AI generated ads, it's good to think about message blending when it comes to podcast advertising. I have a history in radio where you just try to be as loud as possible. But with podcasts, it's really important to match the style of the show because you do already have a very engaged audience. So coupling the creative production strategy with your contextual suitability strategy, I think will lead to the ultimate advertising plan.
Thank you, Amber. Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great because I completely agree with what everyone's been saying. And I think particularly on the point around, from our point of view as well, is leaning in on actually creating what your brand suitability approach looks like. It's easy to say, but maybe harder to actually do. So really leaning in on that space. I think, and I'll be brief in the sense that I think it's always important to be looking at what's coming next and emerging technologies and so on. But I would just say, and I suppose a question to ask would be, as we're exploring these areas and different channels, push your partners to make sure you maintain the kind of core components or core tenets of what safety and transparency kind of really come down to. And I suppose in their very simplest form, it's about control on where your ad appears. It's around transparency and measurement into where your ad appears. And then it's around the kind of verification and I suppose independent accreditation across all of these environments as well. Yeah, as exciting as it is when we move into these new spaces, it's always important to make sure that there's continued focus on those areas.
Thank you, everyone. I'm conscious we're over time, but it was great to hear all your views. And it's clear that brand safety and suitability is a responsibility for all of us. And clearly collaboration is what's going to get us to that consistent measurement. Thank you all.
Thank you.